you see, this is the Igennus range now, and for those of you that are sort of trickled in as practitioners throughout the year, some of you may know some of the products very well, some of them not so well, and obviously there's a few new things popping up here and there. I'm very excited to say that we're working on lots of new and wonderful tools for you all for this year, so hopefully within the next month or so, not only will you be receiving our new practitioner e-news, which contains technical articles, research updates on things that might be otherwise confusing in the media or in the research. We're going to be doing sort of top 10 reasons to recommend one of our products, highlighting things from various other practitioners, doing featured Q&As, so that's going to be a really exciting new feature. But we're also doing some really nice new clinical tools as well, so there'll be clinical guides for all of the condition areas that we specialise in that will go into a bit more depth than we've done so in the previous reference materials that we've given you, into specific conditions, the role of the nutrients that we provide through our products in those conditions, and also how to then specifically apply the various different treatment regimes in those conditions as well. So hopefully that'll be a really useful reference tool, and it will take some of the confusion and maybe that nervousness out of those of you who don't specialize in nutrition as to exactly what products to recommend to who and when and why and how. So without further ado, I'm going to kick off this presentation. And I'm just going to start, if this presentation will let me. There we go. Do type in the chat box in the corner if you're experiencing any problems or freezes with what's going on. A lot of the time, if you're on Wi-Fi, it can upset the quality of what you're receiving, so just bear with me and maybe log out and log back in again if you are experiencing problems, but I'll try and help along the way if there's anything at all. So hopefully you should all know that what we specialize in here at Igennus is inflammation. So everything that underpins the research and the products and the work and everything we do to support you looks at inflammation. So inflammation is obviously the normal response of our body and our immune system when something goes wrong. So whether it's injury, stress, infection, we mount an immune response which is inflammation to trigger the protective mechanisms our body has and to prevent that from causing systemic damage. So we switch on our inflammatory response, which has these three phases: initiation, resolution, and then termination. And that will ultimately, hopefully, deal with and fix the problems that are going on that have caused inflammation in the first place. So hopefully if you attended any of Nina's previous webinars or even maybe some of our live talks, you'll have seen this slide before. And it just shows that the inflammatory process within the body is very tightly regulated, and it's quite complicated when you get down to the nitty-gritty of the science. But essentially, hormone-like substances within our body called eicosanoids are responsible for driving and then resolving the inflammatory process. And what we see as a result of damage, injury, infection, stress, etc., eicosanoids start to pump out leukotrienes, prostaglandins, thromboxanes, which are all of these chemical messengers that swim around and start doing wonderful things to try and repair and fix the problems. When we get to a certain point in the inflammatory response, we have a switch in the eicosanoids that are being produced. So we go from pro-inflammatory to lesser inflammatory and anti-inflammatory eicosanoids. So we need a certain level of the right precursors to those eicosanoids in order to ensure that that inflammatory eicosanoid switch happens. And then we can start to see the upregulation of anti-inflammatory products and the downregulation of pro-inflammatory products. And ultimately, once the anti-inflammatory products swimming around in our system get high enough and strong enough, then that switches off the inflammatory process altogether. So hopefully you're well aware of the fact that our modern diets are throwing all of our tightly regulated and very controlled and very unique systems out of regulation and into kind of total disarray. And a lot of the problems that we see today are exacerbated, if not initiated, by our modern and slightly bizarre and largely unrecognizable diets that we're consuming. So psycho-emotional stress alongside the stress of very, very, very active and abnormal exercise cycles, stress coming from everywhere, basically, including the diet, basically means we're constantly switching into this stress response, into this inflammatory response. And as a result, we've become increasingly more susceptible to prolonged and sustained inflammation, which can result in all sorts of things, as we'll see. So this slide, hopefully again you've seen this, and it's in those lovely glossy A5 brochures that you should have all been sent in your practitioner welcome packs. If you don't have one of those, then email me afterwards and let me know, and I'll send you out a new one. But this just really highlights what we now understand from a scientific and medical perspective to be all of the conditions relating to the inflammatory response. So there's everything in there, and it's quite scary when you start to boil down to it. You've got chronic pain disorders, you've got mental health, even things like schizophrenia and depression have a huge inflammatory component which actually drives the severity of these conditions. We see things like psoriasis and arthritis, which are fairly obvious, have inflammatory basis, but also things like Alzheimer's disease, ADHD, autism, and then diabetic and metabolic complications as well. So there's a huge, huge, huge number of things that are very, very heavily associated with inflammation. So what can we do about it? Well, we can help to regulate our body's ability to switch on and switch off inflammation by giving it the right tools to create pro and anti-inflammatory eicosanoids and then the subsequent messengers for those eicosanoids to make sure that when we switch on an inflammatory response, it's for the right reasons at the right times. The inflammatory response then progresses as it should and switches off as it should. And we can do this through the modulation of our diet and making sure, therefore, that we don't all end up in this silent, chronic, systemic inflammatory response. So the way to do that is to directly impact the levels of the lipids within our blood cells, within all of the cells in our body that actually control what type of eicosanoid is being switched on or switched off and produced. So as you can see here, the major culprit of the pro-inflammatory drive within the body is arachidonic acid. And as we know, arachidonic acid is rife within our modern diet. If you're eating heavy grains or lots of grain-fed meats, then you're going to be getting a lot of arachidonic acid. But we also produce a lot of arachidonic acid as well. So when our arachidonic acid, when our omega-6 pathways are swamped in comparison to our omega-3 pathways, we also get this huge drive towards arachidonic acid. So there's a few really key lipids involved in switching off and controlling the anti-inflammatory side of inflammation, mainly being DGLA, GLA, and most potently and effectively EPA, and then to some extent DHA plays a role in that as well. So the real keys when it comes to inflammation is the arachidonic acid levels and the EPA levels, because these are our significant inflammatory drivers. And what we see, as hopefully again you're well aware, we can certainly, sorry, I'm just reading, Cynthia, your comment. Yes, I can send you the diagram. I'll send you all of the slides, it's not a problem. So we'll give you that. So scientifically, what we see is because arachidonic acid levels in comparison to EPA levels are so important, we do get a really, really useful biomarker that's now being used both as a clinical tool and also as a scientific tool in research. And again, I'm very happy to say that we are on the cusp of releasing our very own full fatty acid profile analysis test that will just be a very simple pinprick blood spot test. So all you need to do is take a pinprick and a squeeze of the blood onto a filter paper from your clients, or they can do it themselves after an overnight fast, pop it in the post back to us, and we'll have it analysed for you and send back your results. So it'll give you a really nice simple tool. We're trying to keep it as cheap as possible, so it'll be it'll be around the sort of £60 mark, we think. And that will be just a fantastic tool to help you understand what's going on in your client's lipid levels without having to spend a fortune and wait for weeks for the results. So this diagram is just, again, a really clarified version of what's going on within our body. We've got your omega-3 pathway on the right there. You've got the omega-6 pathway in the middle, and to a large extent, everything is really good for you, and we need a bit of all of the omegas. But when the trouble is, when we have too much omega-6 and we have preformed arachidonic acid coming in high amounts from the diet, then we just get this huge shunt towards this pro-inflammatory response, and we can ultimately never really switch it off. So there's something always going on there which is causing all those diseases. This diagram just illustrates sort of what people should be roughly aiming for in terms of an ideal AA to EPA ratio. Consistently, when you look at the research, most people in Western societies are well above 7 to 1 in terms of arachidonic acid to EPA ratio, and a lot of the clinical studies looking at things like cancer, depression and Alzheimer's will show that the AA to EPA ratios are well in excess of 15, if not 20 to 1. So there really is a very strong support for the use of both this biomarker as a measure, but also for the role of inflammation and the therapeutic potential of EPA. So this is just a quick summary. There's a lot more things we could add to that list, but just a few of the lovely things that you can expect to experience if you've got a high arachidonic acid in comparison to EPA ratio. So it's not a positive outlook. The great thing is that there are simple and very effective ways that we can help our clients, we can help ourselves, and we can really make a difference. So just by shifting that balance and readdressing the amounts of arachidonic acid in comparison to EPA within the cell membranes through dietary manipulation and through management of stress, we can really, really, really change things. And part of the reason why this arachidonic acid to EPA ratio is so important is because we see that the fatty acids have a huge role to play in not just in driving inflammation, but also in affecting membrane structure, which affects the structure of every single ion channel, protein, communication ability of the cells with those altered membranes. But it also supports the immune function as well as our cell signaling. So the ability of cells to be able to communicate with each other is heavily impacted by the fatty acid profile in the membranes. And gene expression and cell cycle, which is something I'm doing quite a bit of reading into at the moment, is also really, really strongly impacted by the various different fatty acids. And EPA is a very, very, very strong driver of healthy, controlled gene expression and cell replication. So we can start to see that with the arachidonic acid levels and the EPA levels within our cell membranes being so important, that EPA can become a very, very potent therapeutic. So we've known for a long, long time that cod liver oil is hugely beneficial to health. And of course, increasingly now we understand that that's largely down to the EPA and DHA found within the fish oil. More recently again, and consistently so, science is being published to support that EPA and DHA, although in some cases do support one another, they tend to have very different roles within the body. So EPA tends to be much more physiological. Requirements are very, very high, kind of post-development and then pre-old age, where there's all sorts of things going on. Your central nervous system is constantly firing, your cells are communicating all the time, and of course your inflammatory response is under strain from all of these external stressors that are just constantly telling us to, mount this stress and immune response. So EPA's requirements go up massively after the early phases of year, and once we start to kind of feel responsibility, and we've got other things other than just learning to eat and speak and walk are happening. So after about the ages of 3 to 4, most of our central nervous system, neuron myelin sheath, and our brain and our retina are fully developed in terms of structure. Obviously, the cells will continue to grow, but that's where DHA plays its main role. So after those early phases of life, and of course throughout pregnancy, the requirement for high intakes of DHA actually isn't there anymore, and you can quite happily and healthily support DHA intake through just eating fish. But EPA is the one that's under constant firing these days from our modern lifestyles, and it turns over really, really rapidly in the cells as a result. So we need to be thinking about constantly replenishing those EPA levels and making sure that we've got adequate amounts to tackle our modern and abnormal lifestyles. So at Igennus, we really do focus on the therapeutic role of pure EPA, because there are a number of studies to suggest that EPA on its own, in absence of DHA, is a much more potent therapeutic than a generic fish oil. And we actually see that EPA has a very, very, very distinct relationship with arachidonic acid, completely outside of its role within fish oil. So the EPA, but not DHA, which is quite important, can inhibit the enzyme that actually is the precursor to the production of arachidonic acid. So by having good levels of EPA in your cells and within your blood, you're actually switching off your body's mechanisms to create arachidonic acid from the other omega-6s that are swimming around in the body. But EPA also competes with arachidonic acid for the enzyme PLA2, and what that enzyme does is it actually cleaves both EPA and arachidonic acid, as well as other fats, from the cell membranes to then release them into circulation and allow them to go about their business. So you can see again, the higher the level of EPA, the less arachidonic acid is going to be released from those cell membranes, and ultimately the more good things EPA can go and do and block arachidonic acid, which is fantastic news, because we don't want arachidonic acid to be doing nasty things that it shouldn't be. So, sorry, just the very last point on there, on that slide, which I do need to highlight, is because of all of this understanding of the different roles of EPA and DHA, and this very specific relationship of EPA with arachidonic acid, therapeutically, we cannot consider all fish oils to be equal in their clinical effect and their treatment outcomes. So this is why at Igennus we focus very strongly on EPA science, because consistently we see that in conditions such as mood disorders, depression, schizophrenia, developmental disorders like autism, ADHD, cardiovascular disorders, as well as things like cancer, neurodegenerative disorders, and the general inflammatory disorders, EPA on its own has the direct ability to get in there, work its magic, kind of buff everything else out the way, and really shut off the things that are going wrong. Whereas the other fats and DHA, although do play a role in doing that and do support EPA, don't have the same potency in terms of effect. So we've developed this wonderful restore and maintain treatment protocol that does exactly that. So we've got our step 1, which is a pure 90% oil delivering 500 milligrams of pure EPA per very small capsule, and hopefully you will now have the chance to look at our capsules and maybe test them on some clients or test them on yourself. So they are very small, very easy to swallow, and they're specifically designed to optimize absorption, because the more fat you take, the more your body has to struggle, and the more it has to figure out exactly how much it needs to absorb, and the more stress it puts on those enzymes involved in those processes. So if we give it in small but split doses throughout the day, then we can really optimize absorption and clinical effect. So the idea behind the Restore and Maintain treatment protocol is that we give the body pure EPA, nothing else in there, at around 1 gram to 2 grams a day, depending on the condition that we're treating. And then we monitor our clients or ourselves or our family, whoever it is that we're using, for around 3 to 6 months. Now, we say a minimum of 3 to 6 months because looking at blood results, even at the 3-month mark, people who've seen great EPA level increase and really good improvements, if they continue to 6 months, chances are they are still going to see improvements to their clinical outcome. So 3 months is sort of the minimum. 6 months is kind of optimum in terms of seeing the full impact. You can progress further than that, but we don't recommend that people with a specific EPA or inflammatory related condition should stop taking before the 6-month mark, ideally. So once we and our clients are happy with the level of resolve and are happy with their symptoms having improved, then we can start to think about either slightly reducing the dose for EPA and sustaining pure EPA slightly longer, or introducing other fats, including omega-6 GLA. So we actually, in our step 2 product, introduce organic evening primrose oil, which contains a good amount of GLA, which will just serve to keep that omega-6 pathway nice and happy and ticking over, but will keep the omega-6 pathway away from converting to the arachidonic acid, because you've got those good EPA levels that are taking away the enzyme resource that would otherwise be shunting down towards the arachidonic acid pathway. So it's a really, really nice kind of all-round approach. It allows you to target people's conditions, give them a therapeutic dose, a very sort of high, active and clinically proven effective treatment. Then you move them on to a long-term lower dose and a maintenance dose that keeps everything nice and happy. So the Restore, as I've sort of already said, does give you that pure, high concentration product which allows you to be hitting therapeutic doses in just 2 capsules a day. So pretty much everybody you work with will benefit from 1 gram of pure EPA for the first 3 months. If they don't have a major condition, then thereafter drop the dose, move them on to step 2. Those people with a condition, specifically a mood related condition, 1 gram a day for around the 6-month mark and possibly even long term can be very, very, very beneficial. Conditions such as chronic fatigue syndrome, cardiovascular and neurodegenerative disorders, we do recommend that at least in the initial phases, whilst other markers are being observed, that about 2 grams a day is optimal. Now, I know when it comes to chronic fatigue, lots of people feel that the added GLA gives an extra therapeutic bonus. And yes, certainly, if you feel as though the addition of GLA is good there, then please do use one of the GLA products that we offer as a therapeutic option. But we still feel that new patients coming to you with chronic fatigue syndrome, at least in the first instance, will benefit from the pure targeted EPA only. And even if you add in the GLA after 3 months or so, they'll have the benefits of just getting that good high quality EPA. It also means if you're trying to hit therapeutic doses that you're really supporting compliance in patients. I know that if I was told to take 6 capsules of something a day, the chances are if I made it to 4, I'd count myself lucky. Whereas with the Pharmepa step 1, you can hit therapeutic doses with just 2 capsules a day. And in my opinion, that's quite easy. And for lots of practitioners, they've got lots of really great success stories that show that this really, really does work, and that just taking 2 a day is sort of their first port of call for treatment. And then after they see benefits and they get the EPA levels sorted, you can start to address other nutrients that need to be added in as well. So the step 2, as I said already, slightly lower dose of EPA in comparison to the step 1. So it delivers 680 milligrams of pure EPA per dose, which we recommend again 2 capsules. It's also got the GLA in there from the organic evening primrose oil, so it has the benefits of all of the nice plant healthy triterpenes associated with evening primrose oil. But because we recognize that a lot of the areas where EPA was being applied in clinic are associated with inflammation and immune dysregulation, metabolism and energy, there's also a bit of vitamin B5 and D3 in the Farming for Step 2 as well, just for additional all-round support, and again for you to be able to give clients things that you might recommend otherwise without having to, in the early phases, swamp them with 5 different products, of which they've got to take one of this in the morning, one of that at night, 3 of those with lunch, and it becomes a little bit overwhelming for some people. So we've tried to simplify things and give you some of the things that we feel most people will be using in their clinical practice. So this is also a really good product for if you have been working with somebody long term and you feel as though maybe a generic fish oil isn't quite right, but they probably don't need quite such hard hitting early EPA support, then they can go straight on to the Farming for Step 2, and they can use that between 2 and 3 capsules depending on whether you're still trying to target certain symptoms of the conditions associated with inflammation, or whether they just want a general health and well-being dose. But hopefully, as I said earlier, these new clinical tools that we're going to be releasing will give you a really good, clear understanding of what to recommend, how much of it, and to who and what ages, etc., in the various different conditions that we support. So just as a quick sort of overview, we've discussed the AA to EPA ratio, we've discussed inflammatory regulation, but EPA is also involved in regulating our neurotransmitter function. It helps us to control the production and function of dopamine, which obviously plays a really important role in sleep, mood, attention, memory, etc., which is why it has such a great impact in terms of treating mood disorders and depression. B5 is also very good in helping with neurotransmitters as well as steroid hormones. As I said, cell signaling is one of the areas where EPA plays a very important role. EPA actually directly helps to improve the cell's ability to transfer messages between each other, as well as helping to control the activity of a number of ion channels, which are vitally important for cellular communication. EPA has also been shown in lots of studies to be very important for protecting our neurons. So having high levels of EPA will actually prevent the loss of function of the myelin sheath, as well as transduction of the nerve signals. So that's also another great bonus of using EPA. It's very, very good for the heart, not only due to enhanced cellular communication, but prevents inflammation in the vessels, as well as blood clotting. It helps to naturally thin the blood, and also keeps lipid profiles nice and stable. So it's really quite a nice product. And as hopefully you're aware, cell cycle regulation comes sort of hand in hand with its genetic interactions, very, very potent antidepressant effects in addition to the neurotransmitter regulation. So it actually helps to alleviate a lot of the stress induced by the HPA axis being switched on too much, because it balances our cortisol and cortisone, our stress hormone levels to some extent. But it can also play a really, really important role in energy metabolism and production, and this is where we have seen most of our very early clinical benefits was in chronic fatigue patients. And one of the things that EPA does is it actually has the ability to support our mitochondrial function, so the key organelles within our cells that drive the production of ATP, our energy currency, have a really, really close relationship with EPA, and so we can support our ability to produce energy and just support our cell function and our systemic function with good levels of EPA. So that's just a quick summary of what I was saying there. All sorts of wonderful benefits of EPA, and if I haven't convinced you now, I never will. But of course, we've got loads of webinars already on our website. Some of you I know have listened to them all already, so well done you. And for those of you that haven't, if there's anything you want to know more about, please check out the YouTube channel for the Farm-EPA conditions. We tend to focus on the role of EPA in most of our webinars, and then we bring in the other nutrients as well. So there's lots on the YouTube channel, which is just Igennus Healthcare. You can type that into YouTube, or you can go to our website as well. If you go under our new practitioner area, which is on the banner at the top of the website, you'll find that the webinars are now under the practitioner area rather than just generally in the swarm of the rest of everything. Yes, Gina, you can certainly have the benefit summary of EPA. We'll send that out to you, not a problem. And as I said, if you all want the full slide set as an interim solution before we get those clinical tools out to you, then we can send everything out to you. That's not a problem. So I know that a lot of you probably deal with vegetarians and vegans along the way, and actually it can be quite a complicated one, because you might be working with somebody who you think could really benefit from EPA, but they're just not going down the fish oil route, or they're not necessarily ill or symptomatic enough of an inflammatory condition that they need to go down that route. So we have very wonderfully found a vegan, vegetarian, fully signed off by the vegetarian vegan societies as being a great product, certified by them, and this is a really lovely alternative to fish oil for vegetarians and vegans who don't need the full hardcore kind of hammer me hard EPA only solution. But this will really help to give that therapeutic edge to what I hope is already a very omega rich vegetarian vegan diet anyway. So Echiomega is actually derived from a lovely big purple plant. Some of you may know it. It grows apparently quite wildly across Europe and Northern Africa. We source our seeds from plants grown in the UK, and it's a really, really, really nice source of stearidonic acid as well as ALA. So flaxseed, linseed, hemp seed, the traditional omega-3 products that vegetarians and vegans rely on, are primarily ALA rich, which is the parent omega-3 fatty acid found in plants. But stearidonic acid is actually much closer to EPA in the conversion chain, and it bypasses the delta 60 saturase enzyme, which is not really very effective in most of us, and allows for a much, much greater conversion through to EPA than you see with just relying on flax and linseed products. So you can get about 5 times the conversion to EPA by using a stearidonic acid-rich product such as Echiomega in comparison to flax or linseed. And so this will directly support EPA levels within the cell, but also studies are showing that Echium seed oil, because it's a plant oil, it's naturally rich in GLA as well as oleic acid, the omega-9 associated with the Mediterranean diet benefits. It can provide a really nice additional support for vegetarians and vegans for general health and well-being, in addition to inflammatory and EPA-related support. So it provides the building blocks to support your AA to EPA ratios. It's got EPA and GLA in there as well as omega-9, so it's naturally already overcoming the problems of enzyme conversions and steps that could otherwise block the conversion rate. It's totally vegetarian, and as I said already, there's lots of health benefits being considered and found out in the research now. So there's more and more being published on an almost weekly basis to show it has really great immune function support, really good for controlling inflammation. Comparable doses of Echium seed oil to EPA will increase EPA levels within your cells similarly to using pure EPA, so it is a very good alternative for people who don't want to go down the EPA and fish oil route. But it's really good for cardiovascular health. Studies have actually been published to show that Echium seed oil specifically lowers triglycerides, and there are some early lab studies, unfortunately still in adult animal models, but they are getting better, and at least the research is being done to show that it can help with metabolic disorders and glycemic control, as well as reducing atherosclerosis. So it's a really nice additional support option for anybody who can't go down the EPA fish oil route. So this leads me on to our nutritional co-therapies. These three have been developed in line with obviously the benefits of pure EPA. We've taken the key areas where EPA is most effective, and then we've come up with sort of the next best supplements that people tend to go through. They're nutrient blends in the case of Neurobalance and Homocysteine, or Ubiquinol, which is obviously very, very important for a number of areas where Igennus specialise. So these are kind of roughly how things fit together. When it comes to cardiovascular and metabolic disorders, you've obviously got benefits of EPA. You've then got the benefits of regulating homocysteine with homocysteine control, and you've got your VESIsorb Ubiquinol as well, which is your high potency, highly absorbable CoQ10. Mood disorders, Farmipa again, lots of research suggesting that it's sort of the first port of call for depression-related disorders specifically, and homocysteine again is heavily implicated in the development of mood disorders, so we can have a bit of an impact in there. Then neurodevelopmental disorders such as ADHD, autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia. We tend to recommend the VESIsorb product, which I've not touched on today because I'm more focusing on the sort of practitioner-specific adult therapeutic products. VESIsorb you can read all about all over the place and on our website, but because that's a lower dose of just the EPA and GLA, it's very applicable for children, so that's why we recommend that for the likes of ADHD and autism. And the Neurobalance, of course, does what it says on the tin. It balances out our neurons and helps our central nervous system to focus. So just to go in those a little bit more, I'm not going to go into huge detail about the science behind all of the products because Nina's already done that in her previous webinar. So if there is any specific product that you're really interested in, then I would urge you to seek out the specific webinar that Nina's done on those. We've also got some really nice technical papers that go into a bit more detail with references on each of the products, so I can send those over to anyone who's interested. But just as a brief overview, the Homocysteine Control is a B vitamin blend. It's a blend of folic acid, B6 and B12, which when we look at the methylation cycle, which is a biochemical process that's involved in pretty much everything that goes on in our body relating to the use of proteins, homocysteine is a byproduct of that biochemical process. So what we do is we eat protein, we break it down, and the various amino acids that come from the proteins are shuttled and turned into wonderful things like methionine and glutathione, very potent antioxidant, and various other amino acids that perform numerous functions within the body. So what we see in disease and health is that this natural kind of accumulation, as it were, of homocysteine is almost a signal to us that these biochemical processes have gotten stuck. Things aren't quite working. and we're seeing homocysteine levels rising as a signal that something's going wrong here. So as you can see in this nice diagram on the right-hand side with the cycle, that the B vitamins are very heavily involved in the steps that convert homocysteine into the useful products that homocysteine is recycled into. So by giving this very, very specific blend of B vitamins at the highly researched therapeutic and correct doses that the science suggests is active, we can help the body to just kind of re-kickstart that homocysteine recycling, to start clearing it and converting it into the good products that need to be used within the body. Of course, other dietary manipulations and lifestyle manipulations need to go hand in hand with this to understand why the homocysteine levels have elevated in the first place. But it's just a really good support package almost for recycling and clearing those homocysteine levels. So the great thing about homocysteine control and where it differs from other homocysteine support products on the market is that we've specifically formulated it to be as bioavailable as is humanly possible. The capsules are quite small doses comparatively to many of our competitors' products, and it's a slow release system. So what a lot of our competitors' products will do is they'll highlight the benefits of a one a day. But actually, when you take everything all in one go, your body can't absorb it all. Some of it gets left behind. Some of it becomes a bit useless. So you may well be taking a therapeutic dose, but you're not able to absorb and utilize that full therapeutic dose. So we purposefully formulate everything we do to make sure that when you're taking that capsule, everything in that capsule can be absorbed, it can be utilized, and it can be active. So that's where we kind of stand apart. So homocysteine is implicated in a number of chronic diseases, namely cardiovascular disease, mood disorders, and anything associated with the methylation pathway. So methylation is involved in neurotransmitter metabolism, cell formation, red blood cell formation, as well as the functioning of our central nervous system. It's also involved in our DNA, protein synthesis and transport, and actually plays quite an important role in things like detoxification as well as inflammation. High levels of homocysteine and therefore an unhealthy methylation cycle are associated with osteoporosis, increased aging, reduced fertility, all sorts of things. So again, as you can see, much like the AA to EPA ratio, high homocysteine really is a signal to us that our bodily functions are starting to get a bit upset and we need to address it. So by providing this product with highly bioavailable ingredients, the capsules, as with everything we do, again, are small, easy to swallow, designed for split dosing to optimize bioavailability, and this specific plant cellulose formulation that allows the release of the ingredients just slowly into the blood throughout the day really does offer considerable therapeutic benefits to people suffering from a number of conditions. So that's just as a reference tool for those of you that do any testing and you want to try and get your homocysteine levels sort of below 6 in order to be super, super healthy. And there's just some of the roles that a healthy methylation cycle are involved with. So we see neurotransmitter, thus mood, memory, learning, gut function, serotonin obviously being largely produced by the gut. People often overlook that. Antioxidants, very important, of course. Homocysteine is recycled into glutathione, which is a very potent antioxidant, natural antioxidant. So it helps to reduce free radicals, therefore prevents fast aging, helps to protect your heart, etc., etc. So there's a lot going on with the methylation cycle in the body. So obviously on the flip side of that, everything associated with those systems being dysregulated are where the therapeutic application of homocysteine control comes in. Both of these tables, that one and this one, are available in the technical paper, which I can send you, and also you should, hopefully most of you have received a technical flyer as well, which is a glossy two-sided A5, A4 technical document about all of these co-therapies, which gives you more information on what they do, the ingredients, and some of the key applications. But they will be covered in our new clinical guides that will hopefully be with you in the next couple of months. That's the ingredients. So again, as I said, we formulate everything according to the science. So you can be 100% confident that we've researched this to the nth degree and we're providing what is required, what is therapeutic, but we're not just chucking in a load of extra for the sake of it and to be able to charge you and your clients more money, because it's unnecessary and actually in many cases it has a negative impact. So Neurobalance, again, it's a blend. It's zinc, magnesium, and B6, formulated specifically to work with our central nervous system and help with the production and recycling of neurotransmitters. Again, 100% scientifically formulated. The doses are based on what the studies say works, so that's what we've done. And we utilize the slow release plant-based cellulose fiber system there as well, and of course the split dosing to make sure that you can absorb what you're taking. Now this is a really nice product because it has been formulated with children in mind, but because the tablets are very small, even if you're taking sort of the full recommended adult dose, it's not too overwhelming because they are really tiny. So we recommend that kids with ADHD, autism, etc., sort of under the age of 10 to 12, 2 a day should be more than adequate. Likewise, if you're treating mood-related disorders, there's a lot of evidence showing that zinc and magnesium at the doses found in 2 capsules of Neurobalance can be very effective in combo with EPA for treating depression-related disorders. Also, it's technically the ZMA formulation you get in sports nutrition. So again, sports nutrition, lots of people highly active, putting their bodies under a lot of stress and pressure, will use a zinc magnesium B6 blend to help restore neurotransmitters before bed and encourage repair of muscles and tissues and things. So it's a lovely product, applicable sort of all ages, and you can dose up or down and manipulate according to who you're treating and what you're treating for. So that just sort of summarizes again the benefits that have gone through there. Really good for neurotransmitter metabolism, your central nervous system function. It helps with hormones as well. Obviously, zinc and magnesium very heavily involved in hormone regulation. DNA and protein synthesis again require zinc, magnesium. Zinc plays a role in our genetic control. So once again, we see that all of these nutrients are really important for chronic modern Western conditions that shouldn't otherwise be taking hold. So we can have a nice impact there, and unfortunately modern diets do tend to be quite lacking in decent, good quality bioavailable zinc and magnesium. So it just provides kind of an all-round support there for everybody. So that's just a diagram which again is available in those A4 glossy technical flyers you should all have, showing the creation of our neurotransmitters. So you can see serotonin makes you feel good and feel sleepy. Melatonin helps you to sleep. Dopamine makes you feel good. Norepinephrine and epinephrine, otherwise known as noradrenaline and adrenaline, obviously needed for your stress response and to keep you kind of driven and awake and alert. And then of course you've got your acetylcholine and your GABA there that are involved in all sorts of processes within the body. So a really, really good all-round product for support of the central nervous system. And that's just some of the functions associated with the neurotransmitters. So our fight or flight response, mood, sleep, dreaming, attention, focus, learning, feeling good, everything there really that we associate with neurotransmitters can benefit from good levels of zinc and magnesium. And again, therapeutic applications of Neurobalance. It's covered in all of the literature that we can provide for you, and pretty much goes without saying, really. If it supports the central nervous system and your hormones and your stress hormones and things, then it will support everything associated with those things going wrong. And that's the dosing there as well. So you can see we've quoted on the tub the elemental magnesium, but you actually get 376 milligrams of magnesium citrate, which is very comparable to lots of other zinc magnesium blends out there. And again, it's all been scientifically formulated to make sure that we're delivering optimal doses for a therapeutic impact, and without going so far down the take as much as you possibly can for the sake of it, thus causing problems. Cynthia, yes, is the answer to your question. You can take Homocysteine Control and Neurobalance together if you feel that that's a good all-round approach, depending on what you're treating. I appreciate, and I see it myself quite often. You see a client and you start delving into one area, and then they say, oh, well, actually, I've got a little bit of diabetes, but I've been feeling really depressed and I've got low energy. So you're starting to tackle loads and loads of things. Obviously, do be a bit careful. We would recommend, because of the B6 levels, that you probably want to go kind of half doses or 3/4 doses on both products. So depending on what the overriding issue is, for an adult, between 2 and 4 Neurobalance plus between 1 and 2 Homocysteine Control, probably a good way round, or 3 Neurobalance and 2 Homocysteine. But just be careful with the B6 levels there, because we don't want to push those too far down the RDA levels. So finally, we come on to the VESIsorb Ubiquinol. Now, hopefully most of you are well aware of the wonderful benefits of CoQ10 and why CoQ10 is so important. CoQ10 is obviously heavily involved in our mitochondrial function and our energy production, and thus any single condition these days, not only being associated with inflammation, is starting to be associated with mitochondrial dysfunction as well, which is another area I'm desperately trying to swat up on. So I'll update you on that hopefully in a few months. There'll be a webinar all about mitochondrial dysfunction, so look out for that one. Gina, I'll come back to your question about zinc methionine at the end, if that's okay. I just want to clarify exactly what you're talking about, but I realise we're getting tight for time. I've, as always, been blabbering on for far too long, so I'll finish up and then I'll address that separately. So coenzyme Q10 is really, really good in terms of supporting our cells and supporting our ATP production and energy production, but it's also a really potent antioxidant, very natural potent antioxidant. The trouble with CoQ10 generally is that not only are the main sources of it in the diet organ meats, which most of us tend not to eat anymore, but our natural production of CoQ10, as well as ability to convert the inactive, abundant form of CoQ10 ubiquinone into ubiquinol, that actually quite significantly diminishes or depletes with age. So the older you get, the higher your requirements for ubiquinol, because the aging process and oxidative stress process and things are starting to ramp up, but also the lower your ability to create ubiquinol from ubiquinone. The other problem with ubiquinone and CoQ10 in general is that it's a large fat-soluble molecule. So most CoQ10 products, there is quite a significant absorption problem associated with taking CoQ10. So it does make a lot of sense when you are recommending CoQ10 to clients to make sure that you seek one out that's in ubiquinol form and it's specifically optimized to support good absorption and bioavailability. So The VESIsorb technology that we use is actually a patented delivery system, and what it does is it naturally mimics the gut's normal mechanism of fat-soluble molecule uptake. So upon contact with water in our digestive system, the VESIsorb technology will disperse into tiny little microparticles that look like a lipid layer that just encapsulates and surrounds the CoQ10, the ubiquinol, and protects it from the water, which it otherwise doesn't like. And what this then does is it allows the lumen of our gut and the brush border of our digestive endothelium to recognize this lipid bilayer molecule coated nutrient and just to take it up and absorb it as it would any food related product. So it's essentially pre-digested and highly solubilized, which allows for a much quicker absorption. It allows for the levels of CoQ10 within our blood to reach maximum levels much quicker and get to much higher levels in general because it's much easier to absorb, and it ultimately results in a sustained action throughout the day. So whereas a lot of products out there will say, you know, either deliver 200 milligrams or will say take 100 milligrams twice a day, with the VESIsorb technology that actually overcomes that. So by taking one 100 milligram capsule in the morning, you should be seen pretty much right through till dinner in terms of support, but I'll show you a graph in a second which will highlight that a bit more. So as I said, CoQ10 is fat soluble. It's kind of like a vitamin but not quite, but it does require fat for the absorption. Its key functions are in energy production but also in antioxidant support and recycling. And you want to be making sure that you've got the ubiquinol form when you're using supplements, because then the body doesn't have to worry about converting it. Because ubiquinol is the active form, so we need to make sure that we're taking that form in the first place. Our natural production of CoQ10 requires a lot of different steps, and after about the age of 20 to 30, the natural production does start to decrease quite significantly. So although the average diet does contain some CoQ10, as I said, the majority of it comes from the foods that we tend to dislike these days, such as organ meats and fish. There's a little bit in whole grains, but not really much worth writing home about. So when we have a high free radical load, we get a lot of damage and oxidative stress, and this can cause problems throughout the body. Having a low level of ubiquinol not only will result in a much lower natural antioxidant status to help mop up those free radicals and prevent this from going wrong, but it will also impact on our mitochondrial function, as I said. So really important for preventing a number of diseases associated with poor mitochondrial function and energy production. The other thing to note when it comes to CoQ10 is that actually the conversion of CoQ10 within the body and the production of CoQ10 within the body utilizes the same pathway and the same enzymes as the production of cholesterol. So any clients that you're working with that are taking statins are going to be significantly CoQ10 deplete. They're going to start to have aches and pains, which is a neuropathy associated with low CoQ10, but also just really lacking in energy, quite possibly lacking in mental clarity and focus, and as a result can be quite significantly compromised in terms of health, and ultimately can result in chronic fatigue and depression-like symptoms, because it's not nice to never have any energy and to feel achy and just generally a bit sort of not with it all the time. So CoQ10 is really, really important, and actually in a number of countries it's becoming compulsory for doctors to recommend CoQ10 with statins. So just for those of you that don't already know that, that's another area that's very, very important. Just another quick look at the absorption of CoQ10. Generally, We absorb things from the small intestine into our lymphatic system, and then that gets deposited into the bloodstream. But on the whole, fat-soluble molecules tend to be quite poorly absorbed because they have to get past this water layer that sits on the cells of all of our gut lining. So if you're fat-soluble and you don't like water, but you've got to get through water, it becomes quite difficult. So that's why we see generally, if you're not eating decent amounts of fat in the diet, that lots of fat-soluble molecules tend to be lacking in certain people. But also when it comes to supplements, if you're not taking your fat-soluble supplement nutrients with a fat source, or they're not optimized for bioavailability, then you're going to be essentially wasting a lot of that. So around 60% of the oral supplements that we take that are fat-soluble nutrients get excreted into the feces. So you do need to be thinking about making sure people are optimizing absorption in order to get the best therapeutic dose. So whether that be through using something like VESIsorb or taking it with foods containing fat. So I think I've probably already explained this, so I won't go too long, but basically the VESIsorb technology overcomes this problem of the water layer that sits on the intestinal membrane. Because it mimics the natural fat-soluble process of absorption, it just passes through nicely because the VESIsorb is small particles and it's protective of the internal ubiquinol that it encapsulates. So it's really novel and it's really exciting. And actually when we do bioavailability comparisons, you can see from this graph here that VESIsorb in comparison, so VESIsorb is the line in blue, and my apologies that this diagram's not great, but this is on your technical flyers that you should have. The red line is the next best available solubilized oil-based CoQ10, and you can see that not only does the plasma level peak at more than double the optimum amount, it gets into the blood much, much quicker, and it's in the blood at a sustained and what is considered therapeutic level for much longer than standard CoQ10 products on the market. So it really can deliver sort of a long-term therapeutic and clinically effective product. But that's up to you to tell us whether or not it truly is super clinically effective, because this is still very new to us, this product. VESIsorb technology is still quite new to the market, and so we're always very keen and eager for your feedback to tell us, well, actually I've had clients using a different one and they swapped onto yours and they were able to take less and get the same or better benefit, or to the contrary, if you swap people from something else onto ours and it doesn't work, we need to know so that we don't keep promoting it if it's not as good as it should be, and as the VESIsorb developers promised us it would be. But technically, if they've got it right and VESIsorb works as it's supposed to, then we can increase the bioavailability of CoQ10 by using VESIsorb by about 6 times, which is exciting. So it is a 100 milligram capsule, and it does come packaged up with alpha tocopherol vitamin E just to protect it, because it's a fat soluble nutrient. We don't want it going off or causing any oxidation problems. So, but it's highly stable because it's encapsulated in a dark capsule to protect it from the light and to protect it from oxygen. And of course, with ubiquinol being so important for mitochondrial function, for energy conditions, for statin users, and generally functions of the cells, there are a number of therapeutic applications whereby you can see benefits. The key ones, I would say, cardiovascular disease, obviously fatigue and chronic fatigue related disorders, and then anything where you know there's a specific mitochondrial condition. And of course, anybody looking for a really good energy and antioxidant boost, particularly if they've got very stressful, very active lifestyles, then that can be a really, really good product as a support. And that's it. I'm done, thankfully. So what I'll do is we're sending out the first practitioner e-news hopefully by the end of the week, so you'll get a link to the recording of this webinar, but I can also send you all out slides if you want those as well. Most of what I've covered, as I said, should be in the technical information that you've had already, but I can certainly send the tables and the graphs and things out if those are of additional help to you. Any questions? Of course, I'm happy to hang around for another 15 minutes or so. Don't worry, Meta, it's fine. I did wonder what that random splurge of J's was, but I assumed it was a mistake, or it was just pure excitement at the wonderful information you'd been receiving. So yeah, please fire off any questions to me now. Otherwise, as I said, you've all got my contact details. Give me a call, get in touch via email. We're always here if you've got any technical questions, whether it's standing with a client and you're not quite sure what dose and which products, or if there are any contraindications, or you've got a really specific case. We are very happy to spend a bit of time doing some research for you into EPA, and hopefully most of you will have experienced by now that we are very open and honest. If EPA isn't the right solution, or our products aren't the right solution, then we will be honest with you on that one, and not just convince you to take it. And we are very, very, very passionate about the science, as hopefully you can tell from our educational resources. So we do pride ourselves on making sure that what we do is correct and not misleading. Thank you, Cynthia. Have a nice evening. Daryl, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Are you suggesting that the restore and maintain protocol might not be appropriate, or that you feel it is appropriate and you're just clarifying that? There's certainly a lot of research which I can send you separately for your dementia patients, which is supportive of EPA being very good in controlling dementia, but dementia is one of those areas where DHA is important. If it's already set in, you do need to think about getting some DHA, but making sure that you're still getting that EPA excess in relationship to the DHA. Gina, with regard to the zinc, why zinc methionine, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to refer that one to Nina, because she is the expert when it comes to the product formulation. What I can tell you is the reason why we went for zinc methionine is because of its bioavailability benefits. It offers superior bioavailability in comparison to other forms of zinc methionine. But it is probably a good idea if you wanted to discuss that with Nina in a bit more depth. She would be the person to dig into in terms of understanding that better. Daryl, I think it's probably, and I've been meaning to anyway, good if we catch up at some point this week. So I'll give you a call if that's all right, and we can just have a chat. I'm just waiting on a question from Naomi here. But for those of you that have asked your questions and you're happy, the recording will be available on YouTube within a couple of days. All of the slides will be available to you as well, so I'll make a note for myself to email those out. So thank you so much for coming as always. Please keep your eye on your inbox for your deliciously exciting new practitioner e-news, which will be arriving in your inbox hopefully within the next 2 days. And so, yeah, have a fantastic evening. I hope that's been helpful. Anything that springs to mind overnight, hopefully it won't wake you up in the middle of your sleep with some burning questions, but you've got my details. Get in touch. You know where we are. We're always here for your support. And feedback as well. Any feedback on any of the products, formulations, clinical impact, results, case studies, please, please, please let us know, because it's invaluable to us to know what we're doing. Sometimes being stuck in the product formulation and the research, we don't get as much contact with the clinical impact as we'd maybe like. So although it's all formulated based on clinical evidence and clinical results, we'd still like to know how you're all getting on with these things and whether you have any issues or concerns. So please get in touch. Right. Well, if there are no further questions, ladies, have an absolutely fantastic evening. Thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to seeing you all soon, either in person, via Skype, over the phone, or at another webinar. Take care. Have a lovely evening. Bye.